It was past midnight on August 12th, 1977. Elvis Presley's Cadillac eased down a lonely Memphis road, headlights cutting through the mist. No entourage, no flashing lights. Just the king, alone. He wasn't running from fame. He was running towards something he'd lost long before the world ever crowned him. The night air in Memphis hung heavy, still, and wet. The kind of southern quiet that makes even the crickets hesitate. Behind the iron gates of Graceland, the mansion was dark. The housekeepers had gone to bed. The last guard had clocked out. Only one sound broke the silence. The soft ignition of a 1973 white Cadillac Seville. The headlights cut across the gravel driveway. Inside, Elvis sat alone, wearing a loose shirt and a faded jacket. His hair, though still perfectly combed, looked tired, the way a crown begins to slip when the head beneath it grows weary. He didn't turn on the radio, didn't hum, didn't speak, just drove, down past Beale Street, where his voice had once echoed from tiny clubs that no longer existed, past the diner where he used to eat with his mama, back when nobody called him King. The neon signs blurred by, and for a moment it looked like the world was moving too fast, and he was standing still. The streets were empty, only the hum of the engine and the faint crackle of gravel beneath the tires. Elvis gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles turned white. There was a road he always took when he needed to think. Old Highway 51. A stretch of road that curved through the pines, toward a small wooden chapel that barely showed on any modern map. His mama used to take him there when he was a boy. They'd sit in the back pew, hands clasped, whispering prayers about simple things. Peace, strength, a good life. That night, 42 years old and haunted by fame, Elvis was chasing that same peace again. He rolled down the window. The air smelled of rain and magnolia trees. Far in the distance, thunder grumbled, not loud, just enough to remind him of time passing. A flash of memory hit him. The last crowd he saw in Las Vegas. Flashbulbs, cheers, that deafening mix of love and noise. They had screamed his name so loud he couldn't hear his own heartbeat. Elvis! Elvis! It was all adoration, and yet somehow loneliness echoed louder than the applause. He turned the car radio on for a second, static, then a familiar song, one of his own. Can't help falling in love. He let it play for just a moment before switching it off again. The silence felt more honest. Halfway down the highway, he passed a sign, Hernando's Chapel 2 miles ahead. That was where he was going. He parked in the small gravel lot, engine idling softly. No cameras, no guards, just the night, waiting. The chapel door creaked when he pushed it open. The air inside was cool, dusty, and still carried the faint scent of old wood and candle wax. He walked to the front pew and sat down. His hands trembled slightly. On the altar, there was a Bible, worn and half open. A forgotten hymnal lay beside it. He reached out and pressed one key on the old upright piano in the corner. A dull note echoed through the chapel, off-key but strangely beautiful. He pressed another, then another. Slowly, quietly, he began to play. His voice, once the sound of millions, now filled the room in a whisper. Take my hand, precious Lord. The same hymn he'd sung as a boy beside his mama. For a few minutes, the king of rock and roll wasn't a legend, wasn't a headline. He was just a man talking to God through a song. Outside, lightning flickered. The trees swayed. It felt like the whole world was listening in reverence. He closed his eyes. The pain in his chest eased just a little. For the first time in months, he could breathe. Maybe he was asking for forgiveness. Maybe he was saying goodbye. Or maybe he was just trying to remember who he used to be. Before fame, before exhaustion, before the weight of being Elvis Presley crushed the boy named Elvis Aaron. The piano key stuck under his finger. He smiled faintly at the sound. Still out of tune, he whispered to no one. Outside, the wind carried his voice into the trees. For years, nobody knew this drive even happened. There were no cameras, no reporters, just tire marks on a lonely road and a man's quiet prayer left behind. What do you think he was searching for that night? Peace, redemption, or a piece of the boy he once was? Because the place he drove to that night wasn't on any map. The sound of that piano faded into the dark, but in his mind, the echo carried him backward, to the stage lights, the thunder of applause, and the last time he stood before a crowd. June 26, 1977, Indianapolis. Market Square Arena, 18,000 people, cameras ready. It was his final live show. No one in that crowd knew it. Neither did he. The audience roared the moment he appeared. The white jumpsuit shimmered beneath the spotlights. A golden eagle stretched across his chest. From a distance, he looked unstoppable. But up close, his face told another story. Pale, exhausted, trembling. The microphone squealed before his first word. "Good evening," he said softly. His voice cracked on the second syllable. The crowd cheered anyway, drowning out the weakness. To them, it wasn't about perfection. It was about love. He started with "Also sprach Zarathustra," that triumphant opening he made famous years ago. The brass blared, lights exploded. The king had entered his kingdom. But even kingdoms crumble when the heart behind them grows tired. His longtime friend and bodyguard, Sonny West, stood near the curtain, watching closely. Sonny had seen the decline, the sleepless nights, the pills, the quiet apologies that came between rehearsals. A week before, Elvis had whispered to him backstage, "Sonny, I don't know how much longer I can do this." On stage, though, he still gave everything. Sweat rolled down his face as he sang "Hound Dog," "Jailhouse Rock," "Love Me Tender." His eyes searched the crowd, but it was like looking through fog. Somewhere in the 10th row, a fan named Lila remembered seeing him pause mid-song, staring into the distance like he'd forgotten where he was. Later, she wrote in her diary, "He looked like he was singing to ghosts." He ended with, "Can't help falling in love. Always the closer, always the farewell." As the music swelled, his hand shook slightly as he reached for the microphone stand. "Until we meet again," he said, voice trembling, half gratitude, half goodbye. The crowd erupted. People cried, others lifted their cameras, flashes bursting like lightning across the arena. For one final second, it looked like he was lit by heaven itself. When the last note faded, he turned and walked off stage. No wave, no bow, just a quiet exit. The backstage hallway felt colder than the spotlight. Sonny met him by the door. "You okay, boss?" he asked. Elvis smiled weakly. "I just need a drive later," he said. Those words stayed in Sonny's mind for weeks. He didn't know they were prophecy. After the show, Elvis sat in his dressing room alone. He looked at his reflection, the rhinestones, the makeup, the sweat, and for a second, he didn't recognize the man staring back. He picked up a scarf from the counter, still damp with sweat, and folded it neatly into his bag. Beside it, a crumpled note scribbled on hotel stationery read, "Remember who you are." No one knows if he wrote it or if someone left it for him. When he left the arena, fans lined the street. Some shouted his name, others cried. The cameras captured flashes of his smile, but not the silence that followed once the limo door shut. Inside, the world went still, the sound of his heartbeat mixed with the faint hum of the tires. He closed his eyes. For the first time, he felt the weight of his own legend. Like armor he could no longer carry. He had given his body to the music, his soul to the crowd, but somewhere along the way, he'd lost himself to both. What happens when the applause fades, but the echo never stops? The world saw a king. But that night, behind the stage curtain, a man began to disappear, and that whisper to Sonny, "I just need a drive later," would echo into the drive that ended everything. Old Highway 51 stretched out like a memory. Long, quiet, endless. The headlights from Elvis's Cadillac cut through the mist, as he turned off the main road and onto a narrow gravel path. The tires crunched softly. He slowed the car, the engine humming like a lullaby. The small wooden chapel appeared ahead, half hidden between two magnolia trees. Its paint had peeled. The bell tower leaned slightly, as if time itself had forgotten it was there. A single porch light flickered weakly in the dark. He had come here as a boy with his mama. He remembered her laughter, her perfume, her hands clapping softly to the hymns. Back then, the world felt simple. Music, prayer, and Sunday dinners that smelled of cornbread and hope. Now, all of that felt far away. He parked the Cadillac, cut the engine, and stepped out. The night air pressed against his skin. Warm, still, heavy. Crickets hummed their quiet chorus. Somewhere far off, a train whistle cried. He walked slowly toward the chapel door. His boots scuffed the wooden steps. When he pushed the door open, it groaned in protest, as if disturbed from a long sleep. Inside, it smelled of dust and old wood polish. The moonlight spilled through cracked windows, falling across the pews in silver lines. He closed the door behind him and stood still for a long moment, listening. No music, no fans, no applause, only silence, real and clean. Then he saw it. The old piano in the corner, its keys yellowed and chipped. He smiled faintly. That piano had been there since he was a child. He used to sneak up after service and press the same note over and over until the preacher told him to stop. He walked toward it and brushed his hand across the top. A layer of dust rose into the air like smoke. He sat down on the bench. His fingers hesitated, hovering over the keys. Then he pressed one. The sound rang out, dull, cracked, but alive. He played a chord, then another. The music stumbled at first, like a man learning to walk again. But slowly the notes found each other. He started humming. It wasn't rock and roll. It wasn't gospel. It was something quieter, a prayer wrapped in melody. The hymn was "Take My Hand, Precious Lord," his mother's favourite, the one she'd made him promise to keep singing no matter how far he went. His voice trembled, deep and broken but beautiful. It filled the chapel, bouncing softly against the walls. Outside, the wind picked up. The magnolia trees swayed, leaves rustling like applause from another world. He finished the hymn and let the final note hang in the air until it faded into silence. Then he whispered, "That's for you, Mama." For a moment, he just sat there, eyes closed, breathing steady. A tear slid down his cheek, landing on the piano keys. It shimmered in the moonlight. What was he looking for that night? Forgiveness, freedom, or just proof that somewhere beneath the fame, the real Elvis still existed? He took a small notebook from his pocket. Inside were a few scattered words, song ideas, scribbles, half-thoughts. On a blank page, he wrote 3 words. "Remember this piece." He tore out the page, folded it, and slipped it under the piano lid, a secret only the wood would keep. Then he stood up, brushed off his jacket, and whispered to the empty room, "I'll come back." But he never would. The moonlight dimmed as a cloud passed overhead. The chapel fell dark again. Outside, the Cadillac waited, its chrome reflecting the faint shimmer of lightning on the horizon. He walked out, closed the door softly behind him, and took one last look at the chapel window, and what he left behind that night would reveal the truth he never spoke. 2 weeks after that midnight drive, the world stopped. August 16th, 1977, Graceland. The morning sun had barely risen when the gates filled with fans and flashing lights. Sirens wailed down Elvis Presley Boulevard. News anchors stumbled over their words. "The king is gone." Inside the mansion, Vernon Presley, his father, sat at the kitchen table, pale and shaking. The house felt wrong, empty in a way sound could never fix. A few days later, when the noise outside began to fade, Vernon went to the garage. Elvis's Cadillac was parked exactly where he'd left it. Dust on the hood, a half-empty coffee cup still in the holder, a scarf folded neatly on the passenger seat. He opened the driver's door slowly, like disturbing something sacred. The air inside was heavy with the faint scent of cologne and rain. Vernon didn't know why, but he reached for the glove compartment. When it clicked open, an envelope slid out and landed on the floor mat. It was cream-coloured, edges wrinkled. On the front, in blue ink, were 3 words written in his son's handwriting. "For when I'm gone." He stared at it for a long time before he dared to touch it. His hands trembled as he unfolded the letter. The writing was uneven, shaky, like it had been written in the dark. "If you're reading this, Daddy, it means I finally took that drive. Don't worry, I'm not running away. I'm just going to where the noise can't find me." Vernon's eyes blurred with tears as he read. "I don't know when it happened, but somewhere along the road, I stopped being Elvis. I became someone the world made up. They loved that man. But I can't always find him anymore. Tell Lisa Marie her daddy loved her more than the spotlight. Tell her to sing if she wants, but only if it brings her peace. I lost mine chasing perfection." He stopped reading for a moment. His breath shook. "If you ever visit the old chapel on Highway 51, look under the piano lid. You'll find a page. It's not a song. It's a promise. Don't let the fans make this a tragedy. I'm just tired, Daddy. I just want to be Elvis again, not the king." At the bottom of the page, one last line was smudged by water. Maybe a tear. Maybe rain from that night. "Tell Mama I kept my promise. I sang her song." Vernon folded the letter carefully and held it to his chest. The world outside was mourning a legend, but in that quiet garage, a father was mourning his son. For weeks, the letter stayed hidden. Only a handful of people ever knew it existed. Vernon, Sonny West, and one trusted member of the estate. They agreed to keep it sealed. The public wasn't ready to see the truth. Years passed. The Cadillac was cleaned and displayed, but never driven again. The letter remained locked in a small box inside Graceland's archives, next to a few personal items, a pair of sunglasses, a guitar pick, a Bible, and the blue scarf he'd worn on that final night in Indianapolis. Some people said the letter was rumor, a myth whispered by staff who wanted to humanize a god. Others swore they'd seen it, the creases, the fading ink, the sadness between the lines. But those who knew the truth also knew why it stayed hidden. Elvis hadn't written it for the world. He'd written it for peace. And in some way, that letter became the final song he ever wrote. Not with melody, but with honesty. What would you write if you knew the world would only read it after you were gone? Vernon placed the envelope back into the glove box and closed it gently, like tucking his son in for the last time. Then he locked the car, walked back to the house and whispered, "Rest easy, son. The Cadillac stayed untouched for decades, a silent witness to the last truth Elvis ever spoke." The letter was sealed again and locked away for nearly 40 years. Nearly 4 decades passed before the world would hear about that letter again. In 2015, deep inside Graceland's private archive room, a young archivist named June Harris opened a small metal box that hadn't been touched since the late 70s. Inside lay a folded envelope, edges yellowed, the words, "For when I'm gone," barely visible through the glassine sleeve. June didn't know what she'd found at first. She thought it was a misplaced fan letter or some forgotten receipt. But when she saw the handwriting, she froze. She'd catalogued thousands of Presley artifacts, concert posters, ticket stubs, silk scarves. Yet she'd never seen this handwriting before. It was shaky, personal, human. She called her supervisor. They read the first lines together. Within seconds, the room went silent. June later described the moment to a reporter. It felt like touching a heartbeat. Word spread quietly through the estate. No press, no headlines, just whispers among those who had kept Elvis's legacy safe for decades. They decided to verify it, comparing handwriting samples from old lyric sheets and Bible notes. Every curve, every loop matched. It was real. The archivist sealed the letter again, this time in protective glass. For months they debated what to do. Should the world see it? Or should some truth stay private the way Elvis intended? June spent long evenings reading the words through the glass, over and over. Each time, something different struck her. Not the fame, not the sorrow, but the simplicity. A man asking for forgiveness not from others, but from himself. She said later in an interview, "I realized the world fell in love with a star, but this letter, it was written by a son." Eventually, with Vernon long gone and Lisa Marie's approval, the estate decided to reveal a single excerpt during a private anniversary event in Memphis. August 16th, 2017, 40 years since his passing. A candlelight vigil filled the Graceland lawn. More than 20,000 people stood shoulder to shoulder, candles flickering like stars across the night. June stepped onto the small stage. The crowd quieted. Only the sound of cicadas and distant guitar chords filled the air. She read the line aloud. "I just want to be Elvis again, not the king." The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't clap. They just stood there, tears glistening under candlelight. Some whispered prayers, others hummed softly. "Take my hand, precious Lord." That night, for the first time in history, the legend became a man again. It changed everything. Fans who'd spent decades idolizing his fame began to honor his humanity. They started collecting stories of kindness. The hospital bills he paid for strangers, the secret donations he made, the nights he handed out coats to homeless men in Memphis alleys. June became known as the keeper of his secret, but she always corrected people. "It's not a secret," she'd say. "It's a reminder that even kings are just people trying to go home." In the Graceland Museum today, the Cadillac still sits beneath soft light, polished but never driven again. On its dashboard, a small plaque reads, "August 12, 1977, the final drive." The search for peace. Visitors often stop there longer than anywhere else. Some leave flowers, others touch the glass and whisper thanks, because that simple drive, unseen by cameras or crowds, became the truest performance he ever gave, the one where he finally stopped pretending. And for those who listen closely, you can still hear the echo of that hymn in the air, soft and trembling, like a promise kept. The story of Elvis's final drive might have stayed a whisper, if not for what happened in 2017. That same year, a small group of lifelong fans followed a clue from the letter, the line about the old chapel on Highway 51. With the help of county records and grainy aerial maps, they found it, half collapsed, swallowed by vines. Its roof caved in, but the piano still standing inside, waiting. They pooled their savings to restore it. Local carpenters volunteered their time. Old photos guided every repair, from the cracked pews to the faded cross above the pulpit. It took 9 months. When the work was done, the group placed a single brass plaque on the front wall. It read, "Here, a man remembered who he was before the world told him who to be." Word spread fast. Newspapers covered it. Radio hosts called it the Chapel of Redemption. And soon, fans from all over the world began making pilgrimages there. Japan, Germany, Brazil, even small towns across Tennessee. Each August 16th, hundreds would gather outside. No stage, no microphones, just people holding candles, humming the same hymn he sang alone that night. "Take my hand, precious Lord." Some said they could feel something in the air, not sorrow, but peace. A woman named Clara drove 6 hours from Kentucky to see it. She said, "I didn't come to mourn Elvis. I came to thank him. Because if he could admit he was tired, maybe the rest of us can too." Others left notes on the piano, folded pages with words like, "Thank you for being real," and "You helped me stop pretending." The caretakers would gather them each year and burn them outside under the magnolia trees, sending the smoke into the sky. So the king can read them. The small chapel became a living symbol of humanity, not celebrity. Schools began visiting it on field trips. Pastors mentioned it in sermons. Country singers recorded acoustic tributes inside those walls. Even Lisa Marie visited once, quietly, without cameras. She sat in the same pew her father had, head bowed. A witness said she touched the piano key and whispered, "It's still out of tune." Then she smiled. What started as one man's midnight search for peace became a movement, a gentle reminder that the world's brightest stars often burn alone. People began quoting his line, "I just want to be Elvis again." It appeared on posters, tattoos, memorial walls, not as tragedy, but as truth, because that's what legends leave behind, not perfection, but permission. A fan once said, "We used to worship the crown, now we honor the man who wore it." And maybe that's how healing works. One truth whispered across generations, finding new hearts to rest in, because sometimes the loudest truth is spoken in a whisper. Decades after that final night, Elvis Presley remains more than a voice from another time. He's a mirror, a reminder of what happens when the noise of the world drowns out the sound of one's own soul. Most people remember the jumpsuits, the screaming crowds, the headlines. But behind all that glitter was a man who just wanted silence. Not the silence of emptiness, the silence of peace. Those close to him said he never stopped searching for it. You can see it in old footage if you look closely. The way his eyes drift off between verses, as if his heart was standing somewhere else entirely. That's the part most people missed. He wasn't trying to be a king, he was trying to be a man. That midnight drive wasn't an escape. It was a return to the boy who sang in small churches, who believed music could heal, who thought love was enough. He gave everything he had to the world, his voice, his youth, his body, his mind. But peace was the one thing he couldn't buy back. And maybe that's the lesson he left behind, because every one of us at some point gets lost in the noise, chasing approval, perfection, the spotlight. We forget that sometimes the bravest thing we can do isn't to perform, but to pause, to take a drive, to be alone with ourselves, to remember who we were before the world started watching. In the end, Elvis didn't vanish into mystery. He drove toward home, toward truth. At the restored chapel today, the wind moves softly through the magnolia trees. The piano still sits near the front, its keys uneven, waiting. Some nights, visitors say they can hear a faint hum, like someone singing along with the wind. Maybe it's imagination, or maybe some voices never leave the places they once found peace. And if you listen closely, you can almost hear it. "Take my hand, precious Lord." That hymn still floats through the night air, through generations of fans who never met him but somehow understand him. Because deep down, we all want what he wanted, to be seen, not as icons, not as masks, but as people. Fame made him eternal, but truth made him human, and in the end, that's all he ever wanted to be. If this story touched you, share it with someone who's ever felt lost behind their own spotlight. Maybe tonight, take your own quiet drive, no music, no noise, and just listen, because somewhere in that silence you might hear the same truth Elvis found. Peace isn't out there. It's been waiting inside you all along.